In the quiet moments of our lives, when the hustle and bustle fade away, we often find ourselves pondering the mysteries of existence. Among these mysteries is the question of the afterlife, not just for ourselves, but for the animals that share our world. It's a comforting thought to imagine that the creatures we love might accompany us into eternity. This curiosity is not just a modern fascination. It has been a question that has woven itself into human thought for centuries. As we delve into this topic, it's important to consider why we are so drawn to the idea of animals having souls. Animals have been our companions throughout history, offering us their loyalty and love, often without expecting anything in return. They are woven into the fabric of our lives, teaching us lessons in humility, patience, and the purest form of love. It's no wonder that we wish to see them in the hereafter, a place where bonds are not broken by time or circumstance. Many turn to spiritual texts to seek answers. The Bible, a source of comfort and guidance for millions, offers insights into the nature of life and the soul. But what does it truly say about the souls of animals? As we explore these scriptures, we find references that suggest a deep connection between all living creatures and the divine breath of life. This connection might hint at a shared destiny, one that includes all of God's creation in the promise of eternity. In the journey ahead, we will explore the Bible's teachings on this subject, seeking to understand the divine plan for all creatures. From the harmonious beginnings in the Garden of Eden to the hopeful visions of Revelation, each story and teaching we encounter will provide a piece of the puzzle. Together, we will explore the possibility of a shared afterlife with our beloved animals, a hope that brings comfort and inspires us to live with compassion. Number 1, the breath of life. A shared breath that connects us on a fundamental level. Understanding the soul in this way invites us to see animals not just as creatures we coexist with, but as beings sharing in the divine life. It challenges us to recognize the sacredness in all living things, prompting a deeper respect and a call to stewardship. In this divine tapestry of life, humans and animals are woven together in a dance of creation. The soul, as understood through the breath of life, becomes a bridge, a way to comprehend our place in the world and our relationship with the other creatures that inhabit it. As we ponder these connections, we are invited to reflect on how we care for and honor the lives around us, seeing in them a reflection of the Creator's breath. Number 2, the Garden of Eden. Imagine a place where every creature, great and small, dwelt together without fear or conflict. This vision of Eden offers us a glimpse into the divine intention for a world where humans and animals coexist in mutual respect and tranquility. The role of animals in the creation story is both profound and beautiful. In Genesis 1 verses 24 to 25, we read about God's command for the earth to bring forth living creatures, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, and wild animals, each according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. This affirmation of goodness highlights the intrinsic value of every living being within God's creation. Animals were not an afterthought but an integral part of the world's design. In this idyllic setting, humans and animals shared a unique relationship. Genesis 2 verses 19 to 20 describes how God brought animals to Adam to be named, signifying a bond of stewardship and care. Naming the animals was an act of understanding and connection, a recognition of their individuality and place within the created order. The Garden of Eden also represents a glimpse of heaven. The leopard will lie down with the goat, and a little child will lead them. This imagery echoes the peace and unity of Eden, offering hope for a future where such harmony will be fully realized. Romans 8 verses 19 to 21 speaks of creation eagerly waiting for liberation from its bondage to decay and the ultimate freedom that will come with the children of God. This promise assures us that the peace of Eden is not just a memory but a future reality we can all anticipate. In reflecting on the Garden of Eden, we are reminded of the beauty and harmony that God intended for all creatures. It challenges us to seek ways to restore and protect this delicate balance in our own lives, guided by love and compassion for every living being. As we look forward to the promise of a new creation, let us strive to live in harmony with all creatures, cherishing the divine bond we share. After the floodwaters receded, God established a covenant not only with Noah and his descendants but with every living creature that was with Noah in the ark, the birds, the livestock and all the wild animals. Genesis 9 verses 9 to 10. This universal covenant is a testament to God's promise to care for and preserve life on earth. The rainbow, a symbol we often associate with hope and promise, serves as a sign of this covenant. Genesis 9:13 to 17 describes how God sets the rainbow in the clouds as a reminder of the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. The beauty of this promise is its inclusivity. It is not limited to humans but extends to all members of creation, highlighting a shared destiny and purpose. In this narrative, animals are not forgotten or sidelined but are part of the divine promise of preservation and redemption. The significance of the Rainbow Covenant suggests that every aspect of creation is valued and cherished by God. It reminds us that animals are part of God's redemptive plan, and their presence in this story invites us to consider their place in the overarching narrative of salvation. This understanding encourages us to view animals with respect and compassion, recognizing them as fellow participants in the world God has created. The story of Noah's Ark invites us to reflect on our responsibility to care for creation, ensuring that we honor the covenant God has made with all living beings. In doing so, we embrace a spiritual journey towards a more harmonious and compassionate coexistence with all of God's creatures. Number 4. The Wisdom of Solomon. Animals in the Old Testament. In the rich tapestry of the Old Testament, the wisdom of Solomon stands out as a beacon of understanding and reflection. Solomon, known for his profound wisdom, often drew upon the natural world to illustrate deeper spiritual truths. Animals play a significant role in this wisdom literature, serving as metaphors and lessons that resonate through the ages. In the book of Proverbs, Solomon frequently mentions animals to convey moral teachings and insights into human behavior. For instance, Proverbs 6 verses 6 to 8 advises, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." Here, the ant becomes a symbol of diligence and foresight, urging us to learn from its industrious nature. Ecclesiastes, another book attributed to Solomon, reflects on the fleeting nature of life and the common fate shared by humans and animals. Ecclesiastes 3 verses 19 to 21 poignantly states, "Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath, humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth ****. These verses invite us to contemplate the mystery of life and the shared breath that animates all living beings. Jewish tradition has long held a reverence for animals as part of God's creation, emphasizing the responsibility to treat them with kindness. This is reflected in laws and teachings that guide the ethical treatment of animals, recognizing them as creatures deserving of care and compassion. Solomon's reflections encourage us to look to nature for wisdom and to see animals not merely as beings to be used but as integral parts of the divine creation. Their presence in the biblical narrative serves as a reminder of the interconnectedness of all life and the spiritual lessons that can be learned from observing the natural world. Through these teachings, we are called to live in harmony with all creatures, recognizing the divine wisdom that permeates every aspect of creation. Number 5. The Teachings of Jesus. Love and compassion for all creatures. When we delve into the teachings of Jesus, a profound sense of love and compassion emerges, not just for humanity, but for all of creation. Jesus often used parables involving animals to communicate deeper spiritual truths. For instance, in the parable of the lost sheep, Luke 15 verses 3-7. Jesus highlights the shepherd's joy in finding one lost sheep, illustrating God's boundless love and concern for each of his creatures. This story isn't just about sheep. It's a testament to the idea that every creature is valued and loved. Jesus also referred to the birds of the air, emphasizing God's care for them. In Matthew 6 verse 26, he reminded us that if God takes care of the birds, how much more will he care for us? Yet, this also implies a broader truth: God's love extends to all living beings. And we are called to reflect this love in our interactions with them. The image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, John 10:11-16, further reinforces his role as a caretaker not only of human souls but of all creatures under his watch. A good shepherd knows and loves his flock, indicating a relationship of care and responsibility. This metaphor urges us to emulate the shepherd's compassion in our stewardship of the natural world. Moreover, Jesus' actions spoke as loudly as his words. His compassion was evident in how he interacted with people, and by extension, it invites us to consider our interactions with all of God's creation. Jesus' ministry was characterized by healing and nurturing, setting a divine example for us to follow. Compassion as a divine mandate calls us to act with kindness and empathy towards all creatures. As we ponder Jesus' teachings, we are reminded that love is the foundation of our faith, and this love is all-encompassing. It's a call to live with a heart open to the needs of the world around us, to be guardians of the earth, and to extend the hand of friendship to all of God's creatures. Number 6. Paul's vision: all creation awaits redemption. In his letter to the Romans, Paul paints a profound picture of hope and anticipation, not only for humanity but for all creation. He writes in Romans 8 verses 19-22, "For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God." This passage suggests that the redemption story is not limited to human beings alone. Instead, Paul envisions a future where the whole of creation, every living being and every part of the natural world, will experience a renewal and liberation. It's a beautiful reminder that God's salvation plan encompasses all of his creation, underscoring the interconnectedness between humans and the rest of the natural world. Paul's words provide a sense of comfort and longing. They invite us to see beyond our present sufferings and the world's current broken state. Paul's message encourages us to live with hope and to actively participate in God's redemptive plan by showing love and compassion to all living beings. As we anticipate the new heaven and new earth, we are reminded that every creature, great and small, has its place in God's divine tapestry. The groaning of creation becomes a symphony of hope, echoing the promise of renewal and peace that awaits us all. Number 7. Revelation: the divine vision of eternal peace. In the book of Revelation, we are offered a glimpse into a future where all of creation is restored to its intended harmony. The imagery of animals in these visions is both powerful and symbolic, pointing us toward a reality where peace reigns supreme. One of the most evocative images is that of the lion lying down with the lamb, a scene that speaks to the end of conflict and the beginning of a divine peace. This imagery, although not directly quoted in Revelation, resonates with the prophetic vision from Isaiah 11 verse 6, where the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and a little child shall lead them. This promise of peace extends to all creatures, suggesting a future where fear and enmity have no place. The book of Revelation also describes a new heaven and a new earth, Revelation 21 verse 1, where God will dwell among his people, wiping away every tear and abolishing death, mourning, crying and pain, Revelation 21 verse 4. This vision of eternity includes the reconciliation of all creation, implying that animals, too, will share in the beauty and perfection of this new world. The symbolism of the lion and the lamb is more than just a promise of peace, it is a testament to the transformative power of divine love. It reminds us that God's plan for redemption encompasses all aspects of creation, inviting us to imagine a world where harmony is restored. This vision encourages us to live today with that future in mind, treating all living beings with the compassion and respect they deserve. Revelation paints a picture of a harmonious eternity where God's creation is finally free from the consequences of sin. This divine vision challenges us to reflect on our role in this world and inspires us to be agents of peace and reconciliation, living out the love that God has shown us through His creation. As we anticipate the fulfillment of these promises, we are called to embody the spirit of harmony, fostering relationships that reflect the peace of God's eternal kingdom. Conclusion. Embracing the eternal bond between all living souls. As we journey through the scriptures and explore the intricate relationship between humanity and the animal kingdom, we are reminded of the profound bond that exists among all of God's creation. The Bible offers us glimpses into this interconnectedness, inviting us to reflect on the spiritual significance of every living soul. The scriptures reveal that all creatures are endowed with the breath of life, Genesis 2 verse 7. A divine spark that connects us to one another and to our Creator. In the Garden of Eden, where harmony reigned among all beings, we see a vision of the world as it was meant to be, an image of the peace and unity that we long for and that God promises to restore. Through the covenant with Noah, Genesis 9 verses 12 to 17, we understand that God's promises extend beyond humanity, encompassing all living creatures. This covenant is a testament to the value God places on every part of His creation, affirming that animals share in the hope of redemption and restoration. In the teachings of Jesus, we find a call to compassion and love that transcends species. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, exemplifies care for all creatures, reminding us that love is a divine mandate that echoes throughout the universe. As Paul writes in Romans 8 verses 19 to 22, all creation groans with anticipation, waiting for the day of liberation and renewal. Revelation paints a picture of a new heaven and a new earth where the lion lies down with the lamb, Isaiah 11:6, and peace is the defining characteristic of existence. This vision of eternal harmony reassures us that God's ultimate plan is one of unity and tranquility among all His creations. We honor the Creator and participate in His redemptive work. Let us hold on to the hope of reunion and restoration, confident in the assurance that we are all part of the divine tapestry of life. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Psalm 150 verse 6. For in doing so, we celebrate the eternal bond that unites us all.